Witch Hat Atelier is a manga that took me by a surprise. Not only by its amazing art and paneling, not only by its colorful, diverse cast of characters, not only by its tasteful depiction of real-world issues in form of allegories, but what actually made me take a step back was when I realized this might be my favorite depiction of witches ever. What makes it even more surprising is that Witch Hat Atelier is a strong contender for my favorite seinen manga ever. I've seen and read a lot of those, and it is baffling that it flies under the radar in the West. So let's talk about that and discuss what makes Witch Hat Atelier such a masterpiece. First, I have to say sorry to late Sir Terry Pratchett and Studio Trigger. Discworld Witches and Little Witch Academia have been overthrown by these cone hat-wearing balls of joy and misery, but we will get to that later. Shirahama Kamone's manga is a treat to read, and what makes it even great are the small little changes to what we typically consider a witch that really draws you in. First of all, there are no gender terms here. Man, woman, they, them, everyone is a witch. There are no wizards, mages, warlocks, sorceresses or necromancers, just witches. Secondly, instead of using a wand and yelling out a Latin phrase, you draw runes to invoke elements. Very similar to the alchemy system in Fullmetal Alchemist. And lastly, the diverse cast of characters and the absolutely amazing character design. Seriously, there are no bad designs in Witch Hat Atelier. And even designs that are used for one panel go hard, and as a bonus, older characters actually look old. Imagine that. It's like if you took character designs from Bleach and the art and the clothing from a Bright Story and blended them together, creating this wonderful style that is joy to read. I have to gush about the paneling a bit before we really dive in and just show you how it just blends in seamlessly at points. Take for example this 3-panel shot from the first chapter. It's just 3 images connected by a ladder, and the bottom of 2 has been split by a white line to create an illusion of progress. Simple stuff when you point it out, but that makes it a joy to read. There are countless examples which I will show in this video, but I'm obviously not showing you everything. And this is a good time to mention that I will be spoiling quite a lot in this video, but not everything. If you want to go completely blind, then now is the time to pause the video and get your hands on the series. Read it and come back here. There is also an anime adaptation in the works, and I have to retract an observation I made in my Isekai video. I said in that video that most people might use Isekai as a fantasy substitute, since those are not really getting made. But in between Hell currently airing, Dungeon Messi, Frieren at the Funeral, and now Witch Hat Atelier having an anime adaptation in the works. I have to say that fantasy anime is alive and well, and now that I've given you ample warning, it's time to start really talking about Witch Hat Atelier. I think it's for the best if I split it up to 4 different topics and focus on them. So let's go in order of Land of the Pact and the Witch Culture, Coco our main protagonist, her teacher Qifrey, and the main antagonist Brimmed Cap Witches. I feel that if we go in that order, we can easily unravel what this manga has to offer for us, and we can see how our characters interact with magic and the order of the world. Land of the Pact is the word of our story. A rather humble-looking place at the first glance, but as we are drip-fed lore from other characters to Coco, and the world becomes so much more. One of the first pieces of information we learn is that the name comes from an event called Day of Conspiracy, when witches came together to restrict the use of magic. What you really need to know is that magic that was used on humans was banned, outside of one notable exception, which we will get to. While magic that interacts with elements and objects are fine. So you can't resurrect the dead, but you can keep a stew fresh for years without any problems. Now, there is one exception, which is memory magic. This is mostly used by the in-universe witch police, Knights Morales, to erase the memory of magic from criminal witches and random passerby that get unlucky. This is pretty messed up, since this involves taking something from said person, and it gets even weirder when... What was I talking about? Oh yeah, magic. There is another rule. A witch can't practice any medicine, not even to help doctors to do their job. This is internalized by every witch, and characters who are carefree and friendly turn very serious and menacing the moment a witch would even imply to help heal anyone. Thankfully, this is something that does come up often and is arguably the most debated moral practice that outsiders to witch culture bring up. It is a very good moral question to have our characters struggle with, and it's not even close to being solved. This also leads to that the witch culture is a very conservative and fixated on only one way to do magic. This is best shown with some of our teen characters, and especially Richie, who wanted to do her own magic, but her previous teacher was stuck in his ways and didn't let Richie spread her wings and focus on her strengths. One of my nitpicks for this show is that these flashbacks we are shown illustrate that these teachers are acting unreasonable. It would be a good way to show why it's important to have strong basic understanding of magic when drawing rules of magic, unless you want to have OSHA violation on you when the fire spell you made shoots towards you and not upwards towards a chimney. Oh yeah, I didn't actually talk about how you cast spells. Much like in Fullmetal Alchemist, you draw a rune that has an outer circle and symbols that represent the elements you want to have. The quality of your rune is directly correlated with the quality of your magic, and you need to draft this rune every time you want to cast it. The reason I waited so much to talk about the rune system is that I'm not that into theory of magic systems in fantasy world. Soft or hard magic, I don't really care. I just want to see the magic happen and the characters in the story figuring it out themselves. Your mileage may vary, so keep that in mind. I mentioned that the witch culture is very conservative, but don't take it the wrong way. There is a very diverse set of characters in Witch Hat Atelier, ranging from men and women, white and black, young and old, and even fans of the Fire Force manga get representation. I should actually use that point as a springboard and talk about that monologue a bit. During that monologue, it's heavily implied that Lulici and her friend Elien were molested by one of the lords they were working under. Lulici used magic to free her friend, but she gets scolded by her teacher after, and told that he just accidentally brushed on them. It's not a big deal, shutting her complaints down. You can read this in many ways. As a meta-commentary on fanservice that takes away female characters' agency, and when you point that out, you get the comments pointing out the tired, it's for boys, or why you care, it's hot and not a big deal. Even as a commentary the way that people with power can get away with dirty deeds just like that and play it off as an accident, or use their status to shut down the complaints made by women. What I also like to take away from this event is that the witch culture is so set in its ways that using magic as a self-protection is considered a greater sin. It's alright though, as Lulusia and Estet, her captain, strike down this foe and he is never seen ever again. Where was I? Oh yeah, so let's talk about a bit of our characters, and let's start with our main character, a witch in training, Coco. Coco, a daughter of a tailor, is an enthusiastic ball of joy whenever magic comes up, despite not being a witch when the story starts. Normally witches are born into families and are taught magic and magical history from very young age. Before this point, Coco has only been an observer, and outside of buying a magical book, her mother insists that she can't become one. Perhaps for her own protection, we don't know. This all changes when a witch named Qifrey visits her mother's shop and comments on Coco's ability to draw straight lines. During this visit, Qifrey has to perform some magic to repair a carriage, and Coco gets motivation to draw the runes from that magical book she'd bought so long ago. This turns out to be a mistake, and Coco, unbeknownst to her, draws a rune for forbidden magic that turns her mother and the shop into a crystal. Coco is barely saved by Qifrey, who figures out the deal with the book just before it takes out Coco as well. Qifrey tells Coco that this magical book was the work of Brimmed Cap witches and it contains dangerous forbidden magic. Qifrey promises to teach Coco magic so she can figure out how to free her mother without using forbidden magic, and our adventure can begin. We have a goal for Coco, and what this opening establishes very well is that Coco through with no fault of her own, uses magic and it somehow backfires, in some cases in unaccepted ways. This loop keeps happening throughout the story, and sometimes the consequences don't show up till later. Early on, this setup is usually played out with Coco's inexperience with the witching world, and early on she regularly butts heads with the fellow apprentice Agathe, who comes from a more established witch family. I think it's a good time to talk about Coco's fellow apprentice witches, this lovely group of joy. You have Agathe, as already mentioned, is strange, hard-working, and with a big chip on her shoulders. Tetia, an outgoing and supportive heart of the group, and finally Richie, a laid-back person who speaks in third person and wants to do things in her way. Both Richie and Tetia get along with Coco instantly, and especially Tetia is fully supportive of Coco. Agathe does take some time to warm up to Coco and others, but it's very well done, and her dislike of Coco does come from how she was treated and how she perceives the world. It is very satisfying when they all slowly start to work together, to come up with a plan and start really supporting each other. There is also Brassbody. Brassbody is a cute fluffworm. They help each other out, visit magic shops, come up with clever solutions to problems and really try to support each other in finding their own magic. This is the complete 180 which was shown in the Richie's backstory that I talked about before. What really sold me on this group, and it was during when Agathe and Richie were taking the second witch test, along with Euni and Alyra as an observer. Not only do they try to help Euni with his insecurities during the said test and try to play on each other's strengths. This is also the point when stakes really start to ramp up. During this test we are introduced to the backstory of this Snake Way, and it is a very familiar tale, which royalty looked down upon poor and downtrodden and forbid entrance to their perfect kingdom. After all the rabble have been thrown out, the witches turn to each other and find arbitrary flaws and turn their fellow humans into gold. But in the end, the mighty kingdom crumbles on the weight of their own greed, and nothing is left except this Snake Way. It's so on the nose that our characters do not see a Brimmed Cap attack coming, and the test turns into a fight for survival. During all of this, Euni gets absolutely the short end of the stick and has forbidden magic used on him, turning him into a wolf. Like I felt bad for him. He gets all this confidence built up and then snap, doomed to walk on the earth as a beast, and even if the witches help him, he will most likely just be memory magicked, so that he is one of the unknowing. Hope is not lost, because couple of great things happen. First, those gold statues turn out to be real, and they take down Qifrey, who was protecting Tetia and Coco. Tetia and Coco solved this by, well, talking, answering a riddle and giving the gold statues a form of magic that finally frees them from their torment. I guess friendship is more valuable than gold. Second, the group figures out how to counteract the forbidden magic without using any forbidden magic. This doesn't work, unfortunately, but what does work is that Iguin, the Brimmed Cap that has been following Coco for years, shows them how to do it with attaching a magical necklace to Euni, and only demanding that Coco does some forbidden magic. Coco then tricks Iguin and getting the necklace and turning Euni back to normal, except the forbidden magic is still written on him. With a real threat that Euni will have all of his knowledge of magic wiped out, Alyra takes him under her wing and they wander the lands and return when they figured out how to undo the curse put on Euni. This second test is really the turning point for a lot of things. It shows Qifrey's unrelenting hate towards Brimmed Cap, which I will talk about later, and really brings our four little witches closer together. And the payoff happens almost immediately as they try to impress Qifrey's master Beldarwit. This moment also shows the consequences of forbidden magic to other than Coco and Qifrey. This motivates our group to find loopholes how to counteract this magic without actually using it themselves. This is probably best shown when Coco and another character named Tartar use their knowledge to build a handicap harness for another character called Kostas. Kostas' legs were crushed earlier in the story, and this is actually his second appearance. This keeps happening where earlier, sometimes inconsequential characters come back and their reappearance is usually accompanied by a moral question regarding magic and its uses. This gets resolved peacefully and things turn out great for Coco, Tartar and Kostas. And it gets even better when Kostas returns again for the third time and... Let's talk about Qifrey, my favorite character in this series so far. Qifrey is the teacher for Coco, Tetia, Richie and Agathe, and is a contrast to some other teachers shown that he actually cares about his students. He will defend all of them and try to guide them towards learning magic in their own instead of insisting that they learn how to do it in his own way, and only in his way. There is another character that I haven't mentioned yet, Qifrey's best friend since childhood, Olruggio. Olruggio is a watchful eye, which is just an observer that reports to Knights Moralis. If he notices any use of forbidden magic or any other banned practices, such as witches using medicine. Don't let that fool you though, Olruggio is a really understanding and loyal friend and good tutor for our apprentice witches. Watchful eye is also not just a snitch, but they have another task, which is to ensure that the witch and their apprentices are treated well. This is shown multiple times when Olruggio acts like a parent and makes sure that they have enough rest. Coming back to Qifrey, what makes him such a great character is that he is a very flawed person. We learned about 1/3 way into the story that Qifrey has a history with Brimmed Cap witches. He was found in a coffin, his memory erased, and this is the big motivation for him to pursue the Brimmed Cap witches. You start to question if he took Coco as an apprentice because he really wanted to teach her about magic and help her free her mother, or if Coco is just a tool for his own means. I lean towards the former even with the examples I'm about to give you. He genuinely cares for his little witches, and when given choice, he always chooses them over his personal revenge. So what makes him flawed? Well, he does take multiple extreme methods to keep Coco and others safe. For instance, he memory wiped a friendly shopkeeper's mind and lied to the shopkeeper's grandson when pressed for information. This is not even the worst one. Olruggio, his friend, tries to talk to him about if he really keeps Coco around to teach her magic or just as a tool to get to Brimmed Caps. Qifrey reveals him why he does what he does, and Olruggio is on board with him. But this is not good enough for Qifrey, as he memory wipes the conversation from Olruggio right there and then, in the fear that Olruggio will report Qifrey's motivation to someone else. Such a powerful moment, it does plant some doubt in your mind as you keep reading it. Is there perhaps a moment in the future where Qifrey does choose revenge over his apprentices? Look, even the way he used the memory magic on Olruggio is a cool parallel to Iguin's mask. Perhaps there is more to that, but the story has not yet gone that far, so we can only speculate. Okay, so for the next topic, like I said earlier, let's talk about Belderud and his relation to this story, before moving on to Brimmed Caps and... Wait, what you mean I didn't mention that? Are you okay? Alright, enough games. Let's talk about the main antagonists, the Brimmed Cap Group. We actually know very little about the Brimmed Cap Group. We know that they reject the Pointed Hat Witches and the Knights Moralis. They practice the forbidden magic, and Iguin has been working in the shadows, watching over Coco and calling her their savior. What does being a savior mean in this case? We don't know yet. We don't know the details yet and can only speculate. But what we do know is that Iguin has my favorite design of anyone in this series. So the goal of the Brimmed Cap Group is to break the pact made at the day of the conspiracy and have witches practice old arts as they used to. At what gain? Currently only for selfish reasons. But when we look at the society that the Pointed Hat Witches have built, we can see their argument more clearly. Magic can do great harm, but it can also do good. Most obvious example being the practice of medicine being limited to only non-witches. You could easily make the argument that using magic to heal others would save more lives, and that the Pointed Hat Witches are stubborn in their refusal to allow such practices. For regulated use of forbidden magic could be beneficial for the society as a whole than outright banning it and only leaving the use of it to morally questionable witches. Unfortunately for the Brimmed Hat Group, they're not making that argument. At least not yet. All this talk about Coco being their savior, but when you look at these alternative images of Coco, if she was tutored by a queen instead of Qifrey. While beautiful, Coco's choice of outfit is very telling. Perhaps this aristocratic dress that the dark Coco wears in these images is a hint that maybe Brimmed Cap witches want to overthrow pointed at mages and just replace them as a monarchy ruling over everyone else, like witches used to do. They also don't make a very compelling case when all the usage of forbidden magic outside of one during the latest arc has been net negative for everyone involved. Time will tell, and I do trust the author enough that she will make it interesting, and I think this is a good stopping point. Witch Hat Atelier is a genuine masterpiece, and I would recommend it to anyone looking for a slice of life story with compelling characters and rising stakes as the series goes on. This might even be a good introductory manga and hopefully soon an anime to recommend for newcomers to that genre. This definitely jumps to the top of my list of seinen manga to recommend to people without bunch of asterisks or prior knowledge of person's taste and tolerance to anime and manga tropes. I obviously left bunch of stuff out and didn't go into details when I didn't have to, for I wanted you to experience the journey yourself and come to your own conclusions. I also didn't talk about the kitchen spin-off at all, so you have that to look forward to as well. I also left out stuff like the clothing and my theory that the author really likes the clothes and fashion in general. What with the amazing design and Coco being a daughter of a tailor. I read the author's previous work Eniale and Deviale, or just Any Devi, to find more about that. While it does shine some perspective on that, I just didn't have much to say about it. Also, Any Devi turned out to be a bit of a hidden gem. Definitely check it out as well. It's more comedic and more raunchy than Witch Hat Atelier, but still a great time. Witch Hat Atelier is licensed in English by Kodansha, and there are many other language translations out there. The perk of Witch Hat Atelier being an award-winning manga is that you can find copies at well-supplied bookstores and do support the official release. Thank you for watching and have a magical night.